You nailed the fit and situational rounds, but if you freeze when they ask, walk me through a deal you followed in the news, the interview flatlines. You won't get the offer. This is part 3 of my 4-part behavioral masterclass. So far, we've covered big picture fit questions, star questions, and the last video will be about trends and any other questions bankers love. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. By the end of this video, you'll have a 7-step deal framework that works for any transaction, including where to get information for each step, a 90-second sample answer featuring Pepsi's $2 billion buyout of Poppi, and like always, some rapid-fire tips. Let's start with the framework. First, you will give the snapshot of the deal. Here, you could include things like the deal type, who are the parties involved, how big it was, and when it happened. Generally, you can find this in the press releases made by the company acquired or the acquired company. Second, you can talk about why the deal was made. You can also find this in the press release we talked about before. There's generally a quote from an executive from each company that gives the corporate answer as to why the deal was done. I would also recommend reading news articles here since they talk a little more about why the two companies potentially did it beyond the corporate reason. Third, talk about the consideration. Here you can talk about many things, but I would focus on whether it was an all cash or an all stock deal, and if there's cash, whether there was any debt taken out. You can find these in the press release most of the times, and if the deal closed already, you can also look at the form S4 for a ton of detailed information on the deal. You can also get fancy and talk about the tax benefits like in the Pepsi acquisition we'll talk about later, but that is risky because it opens up to follow-up questions that you might not know the answers for. For the 4th and the 5th points, you're expected to know some valuation metrics and whether there were any synergies in the deal. Here, I would look at their investor presentations. In the Celsius acquisition of Allen & New, they disclose all their metrics in one of the slides in the presentation. It's actually a perfect slide for this type of research, so try to find this slide if you can in the acquisition you're researching. Then number 6, as for the process, I personally didn't include this in my answer, but I've seen it included. You can mention whether the process was an auction or if it was just a negotiated sale between two parties. You can also talk where they're at in the timeline, whether it was just announced or if it already closed and the companies are integrated already. And you can also mention if there's any potential regulatory issues. A great way to learn more about this is, again, Form S4. It includes many things, but one of them is an entire, pretty much transcript of everything that happened in the deal, so you can read about the whole process. It is a long read, but if you're interested as to how the negotiations went on and what happened throughout the process, you can find it in this form. Lastly, you could talk about the market reaction and maybe give a couple of personal thoughts as to why you like or dislike the deal. I would just look at the stock price when the deal was announced and read a little bit about what the analysts are saying. I would keep your answers around 90 seconds, like I've mentioned in all of my videos, and let the interviewer ask any follow-up questions. I will now give you an example answer with the Pepsi and Poppi acquisition. I drafted this answer in around 25 minutes with the help of ChatGPT, so definitely use it as a tool. So here we go. Hi, can you talk about any acquisitions that you've been following in the news recently? Yeah, so this past March, Pepsi acquired Poppi, which is a very fast-growing prebiotic healthy drink. And I think through this acquisition, Pepsi acquired a massive brand to attract a new trend of health-conscious consumers. And they also wanted to compete with companies like Coca-Cola, who just launched Simply Pop, and Olipop, who just raised a massive $50 million round. Pepsi paid $1.95 billion in cash. They didn't take out any debt or issue any equity because they had enough cash in their balance sheet to pay for it. However, they did mention that the net price will be $1.65 billion because they will be able to use $300 million in tax benefits, which obviously is pretty good. Given Poppi had reported revenues of around $400 million in 2024, this would lead to around a 4x revenue multiple valuation, which is in line with Olipop's recent valuation of a reported 5x revenue multiple. This is really solid because Pepsi is likely to benefit from some synergies when it integrates Poppi because it's a strategic acquisition. And as far as public opinion, when the deal was announced, the share price didn't move as much as I thought it would, and it has been declining steadily ever since, but that is likely due to the general market taking a hit. So it's probably too early to say whether this will be a successful acquisition or not, but it does fill in the health-conscious market gap that is likely to grow in the future for Pepsi, which is definitely good. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. So there's my example answer. As you could probably tell, I skipped the process part and didn't mention any specific synergies because the Form S4 hasn't come out yet, so there's still some information missing. The framework I gave you is useful to structure your answer, but feel free to adjust it so your answer flows better and based on the information you find. Now I'll give you 3 final tips for you to take home. First, pick a deal that's less than 24 months old with public filings. It keeps it fresh and interesting for the interviewer. Memorize key numbers such as the deal size, key multiples, and the share price move when the deal was announced, and try to pick a deal your bank did to show that you've done your research and you really care about the bank you're interviewing for. But yeah, I think if you have this framework, you can pretty much figure it out and you can do well when you get asked this question. That's all for this week. This was the 3rd video of the series. Let me know if you want me to make a 4th on trends or any other behavioral topic that comes to mind that you're struggling with. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell and the like button so the algorithm shares this video. We post videos every Wednesday, so we'll see you next week. Peace.